Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a piece of legislation that really shook up the rules for almost every workplace in India, the Industrial Relations Code of 2020. Now, this wasn't just some small tweak. It was a complete overhaul of how companies, workers, and unions all interact. So let's break down what actually changed. For decades, India's labor laws were this complicated patchwork. You had different laws, some even dating back to the 1920s, all overlapping and creating a ton of confusion. The main point of this new code was to just cut through all that noise. It took three major historic acts and rolled them all into one single streamlined framework. The goal? To create a modern rulebook for a modern economy. So to get our heads around this, we're going to tackle it in 5 parts. We'll start with the why this big consolidation was needed. Then we'll get into the new rules for trade unions. And after that, the really big changes around strikes and layoffs. We'll also look at the new process for sorting out disputes, and we'll finish up by summarizing the key takeaways you need to know. All right, first up, the why. Why go to all the trouble of this massive legislative change? Well, the stated goal was to take a legal system that was pretty old and frankly clunky and make it simpler, faster, and just a better fit for today's world. And you can see that mission right there in the opening lines of the law itself. It's an act to consolidate and amend. Those 2 words are everything. This wasn't about making a few small edits here and there. Nope. This was about tearing down a scattered system and building one single comprehensive rulebook for how employers and employees talk, negotiate, and sort out their problems. That brings us to trade unions. Now, one of the biggest changes in the code is how it answers a super important question. If a company has a bunch of different unions, who actually gets to sit at the table and negotiate with the boss? The new law sets up a really clear, numbers-based system to figure that out. And it all starts with this one number, 51%. This is the new magic number for a union to become the one official voice for all the workers in a company. So, if a single union can prove it has the support of at least 51% of the workforce, it gets this special title, Sole Negotiating Union. And trust me, this status is a huge deal. It means that one union, and only that one union, gets to negotiate for everybody on everything, from paychecks to working conditions.
Okay, but you might be thinking, what about the real world? It can be pretty tough for any single union to get over that 51% mark, right? A lot of workplaces have support split among several groups. Well, the code thought of that and created a plan.
And that plan B brings us to our second important number, 20%. This is the number that kicks in when there's no single majority union.
So, when no one hits that 51% threshold, the law says you have to form what's called a negotiating council. Basically, it's a team. This council is made up of people from every single union that has at least 20% of the workers' support. It's a clever way to make sure that even without a clear majority, all the significant worker groups still have a collective voice at the bargaining table.
Okay, let's move on to what is probably the most talked about, most controversial part of this code, the new rules around strikes, layoffs, and shutting down a business. This is where you really see that tug of war between making things easier for businesses and protecting workers' rights. The first major change has to do with the right to strike. Before this code, only people in certain essential jobs, like public utilities, had to give a heads up before a strike. The new code says, nope, everybody has to give at least 14 days notice. Plus, strikes are now totally banned while any official negotiations or hearings are going on, which makes it a lot harder to call a legal strike on the spot. Now, on the flip side, the code gives a lot more flexibility to employers. Under the old rules, if you had a company with 100 or more workers, you needed the government's permission to do mass layoffs or shut down. The new code triples that number to 300 workers. That's a huge change. It means thousands of smaller and medium-sized companies can now make those big decisions way faster without needing to wait for a government green light.
But to try and balance out that new employer flexibility, the code also introduced a brand new kind of safety net for workers. It's a system designed to give a financial cushion to anyone who's been laid off.
It's called the Worker Reskilling Fund. And here's the deal.
For every single worker that's laid off, the company has to put an amount equal to 15 days of their last salary into this fund. That money is then supposed to land in the worker's bank account within 45 days. The idea is to give them some immediate cash to help them get back on their feet and maybe learn some new skills.
So what happens when disputes pop up? How are they supposed to get fixed? Well, the code creates a new, very clear step-by-step process for handling disagreements, especially for individual workers. The whole process is designed to work in 3 stages. First, you start inside the company with a grievance redressal committee. If that doesn't solve the problem, it gets kicked up to a government conciliation officer, who's like a neutral mediator. And only if that still doesn't work can the case go to the industrial tribunal for a final decision that everyone has to follow. The goal is to solve problems early and at the lowest level possible. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. So let's just boil it all down. What are the absolute most important things you need to remember about the Industrial Relations Code? So here are the biggest shifts in a nutshell. First, you've got 3 old laws getting squished into one. Second, there's a new, clear, numbers-based system for which union gets to negotiate. Third, that 14-day strike notice is now for everyone. Fourth, companies with up to 300 employees get more freedom to lay off workers. And fifth, to balance that, there's the new reskilling fund to help those who are let go. And all of this leaves us with the big central question, doesn't it? The whole point was to simplify things and strike a new balance. A balance between making it easier to do business and protecting the rights and welfare of workers. The real test is whether it can actually pull off both. And honestly, that's something we'll only find out as these new rules play out in the real world. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.